Hello there, and here is a fairly typical Windows laptop. It's currently running Windows 11, and I'm going to install Linux Mint on it, just to show you how straightforward it can be to do so. This laptop is about 8 years old, but it's still fairly typical of most laptops you'll find kicking around your home today. So, let's get started. Before even considering to install Linux Mint on here, make sure you back up anything that might be needed off this computer. If you're not sure, don't do this because you cannot undo it once it's done, or at least you can't get your documents back once it's done. One of the ways that you can do this, although again this is only one way and it's not necessarily going to cover everything. You know where your documents are stored, you know where the data that is important on the computer is stored. I can't tell you that, but one of the sort of simple ways of just getting some of it backed up is to get an external hard disk. They're relatively inexpensive these days, and create a folder for documents, a folder for pictures and so on. Go to your documents and just copy the ones that you need. So I'm going to copy these and then go to the documents folder on the external disk and paste a copy of them there, and that'll do my documents. And then I'm going to do the same for pictures, so I'll copy these, go to pictures here on the external disk and paste them in there. Obviously the more you've got, the longer this will take. And then don't forget your documents. So I'm just going to create the desktop documents, sorry. So I'm just going to create a new desktop folder on here. Yeah. I wouldn't bother copying shortcuts and stuff because they're not going to really work when you switch over to Linux Mint, but if you think you might need them, of course back them up, there's no harm in that. But I know from here I only need this document, so I'm going to paste that on the desktop. Now the other thing that you might want to back up is things such as browser bookmarks. And that's fairly easy to do. We can import them and export them. So I'm going to create a new one called bookmarks. And I'm going to show you how to do it first in Firefox. So if you're using Firefox, click on the three lines here known as the burger and go to bookmarks and then manage bookmarks. And then go import and backup, and we're going to do backup. We're going to go to our external drive, go to bookmarks, and we'll call this Firefox. And save. So if we close out of this, we've now got our Firefox bookmarks here. I'll do the same for Chrome. 3 dots. Bookmarks and lists and bookmark manager. We'll just close this and click on the 3 dots next to the search, and we'll do export bookmarks and then browse again to our external hard drive, and we'll call this Chrome. And if we close that again, we've found we've got our Chrome file here. And I'll also show you how to do it in Edge. So again, it's very similar to Chrome, although it's called favorites instead of bookmarks. 3 dots, export favorites, and then we'll call this one Edge. And save that there. And that's those backed up. Of course, if you do sign into your browser using, a Microsoft profile or a Google profile or a Mozilla profile, depending on your sync settings, when you come to log into any of those 3 browsers on Linux, it'll just sync everything over for you usually. So actually it's a pretty good way of doing it. If you use cloud backup, again, such as OneDrive, you can use these tools to restore your files onto the new install of Linux. However, make sure absolutely make sure that everything is synced and backed up to the cloud before you even consider wiping it, because sometimes not everything syncs in time, so it's usually a good idea to take a hard copy locally anyway, and it's faster. If there's any specific tools for the software that you use for backing them up, then you should also run those and do it to an external disk. Do not back up anything to the local hard drive, because the process of installing Linux will wipe it. So now we've got that awkwardness out of the way of backing everything up, let's go over to how you're actually going to get it on here. Now, the first thing that you need to do is download a copy of the Linux Mint installer. So if you go to linuxmint.com, I have a video explaining how to do this, but we want to download, and we want to download the Cinnamon Edge ISO, so you click on download. If you have a torrent client, you can use the torrent, which is a bit faster, or you can use any of these and just download the ISO file that it provides you, which downloads. I've already done this. After that, you need a tool such as Rufus, which is going to flash the install ISO onto a USB stick. So I should mention you need, I think it's at least 4 gigabytes, though I'd probably recommend 8 these days because the requirements keep changing. USB stick, such as the one here, and make sure that you've got any files off it that you need before running this process, because flashing USB sticks with installs, again, also completely wipes them. So back them up to, well, I would recommend the drive that you're using to back up your documents. So yeah, you need 2 drives in my opinion. You need one to back up your files, so an old external hard drive with plenty of space will do great, and then a 4 or preferably 8 gigabyte, if not more, USB stick, which is blank or can be blanked safely for pushing the install file on. So once you go into Rufus, you scroll down, you download Rufus here. It will then run the installer. I've already done this. Only thing that I'd say watch out for is sometimes you get a little bit of a pop-up saying, you know, with an advert, and just remember it's an advert and it is a little bit clickbaity, but the program itself is fine. So you then just go to start and look for Rufus, and if we can spell it correctly, Rufus. Yeah, there we go. And click yes. And it will show, and obviously now that we've backed up all our files, we're going to eject the hard drive. Oh, it's currently in use. Oh, maybe Rufus has grabbed it. So I'm just going to close everything down and then eject it. It's always best to do it safely if you can, because you don't want to be losing those files. Then you stick in your USB stick that you're going to push the installer to. As you can see, mine's already got Linux Mint on it, so I don't need to yeah, so you select USB stick. So mine's called Linux Mint. Yours will have a different name, probably like SanDisk or Kingston or whoever. Mine's got Linux Mint on labelled here because I've already flashed the installer to it. But effectively, you would then select the USB stick you're going to use, select the ISO that you downloaded of Linux Mint, and off you go. So I've already done that, so that means I'm good to go. So the next thing I'm going to do is restart the computer. We're going to need to get into the boot menu to boot off this USB stick. On most computers, that's probably going to be F12. In this case, it's an HP, and as far as I can remember, I can get into it using F12. However, not all HPs necessarily use F12, although most of them do these days. Some use a different key. It usually says on the BIOS screen, you know, the screen that shows up when you first turn it on, that says like HP or Dell or Asus or whoever. But if you're not sure, stick the model number and the manufacturer of your computer into Google along with like boot key, and it should tell you which one you're going to need. So I'm going to restart this computer now, and we'll get into the boot menu. Sometimes I like to just press it whilst the computer's booting, because sometimes you don't always press it quite at the right moment. There we go, it's got it. No, it isn't. That is the network boot. I don't want that, so I'll do Control Alt Delete. I think what it actually is F9 on HPs. F9. F12, yeah, there we go. So I'll just go down. So this is a SanDisk Cruiser, and we want to make sure that so this is using, there's two types of BIOS. You've got UEFI BIOS and you've got what they call the legacy BIOS, and really want to use UEFI if you can. It's better. You can use Secure Boot if you want, but if your computer doesn't support it or you find you get in trouble with UEFI and it gives you the option for legacy, use legacy in that instance. But we're going to use UEFI, UEFI here. So just use your arrow keys and then the enter key to select, and then we want the top option, and again it's just use the arrow keys and enter. I should mention with the boot keys, it's so F12 was originally for booting off of networks for us, so if it was like deploy for allowing system administrators to deploy what we call images to loads of computers all at once, often with very specific requirements, but the keys kind of come with a lot of manufacturers universally. Just hit F12 and it gives you all the possible boot options that you want for that computer. However, HP still seem to be sticking to using the old F9 key for boot options and F12 for network only. So like I say, it can vary from model to model, manufacturer to manufacturer as to how it's been implemented. So anyway, so we've got Linux Mint booted up. Now this is actually a live session. You can actually use this and try out Linux Mint without changing anything to the hard drive, in theory, which is really handy. There's a little we've got, if we go to internet, we've got Firefox web browser here if we want it, and it will connect to the internet. Yeah, so just to prove it, we go to, like, you know, linuxmint.com and it works. So that's wonderful. So if you ever need it, you can use it for that. We can actually access the hard drive and even make changes to it, but we're not going to do that here. We're actually what we want to do is install Linux Mint. So double click on the install Linux Mint icon on the desktop. So the other thing I might quickly do is just correct this display, if it's going to let me. It's display on here, isn't it? Yeah, just because it's completely lost the display. This probably won't. Oh no, it's only going to let me use that, is it? Yeah, it can't detect what size monitor I've got here because I'm using a VGA capture device, and a very cheap one at that. So yes, right, we're stuck with this stretch, and I do apologise for that, and the poor video quality is because I'm using a rather cheap VGA capture device, because that's all I have. Anyway, so next, and select the correct keyboard layout for you. I like to install the multimedia codecs. Also, if it detected that you have the option for secure boot, it would give you a prompt for a password in here, and you put a password in there, and then you can use that to install the secure boot keys into the computer later in the setup. Obviously I don't want to cover that here because this laptop clearly doesn't support it for Linux. However, I have a video on multi-booting which does explain how to do that. So continue. As an FYI, these multimedia codecs are often used for playing back some common video and audio files, so I recommend having them in there. So I have the choice. I can install Linux Mint alongside Windows, which I did a video on multi-booting previously, so you can see how that's done. However, today I'm going to do a complete erase and just put Linux Mint on this machine. So I'm going to erase, which is going to take everything off the hard drive, completely wipe it, and install Linux in its place. There's going to be no Windows left. If you don't want to do that and you want to do, you know, still keep Windows in some fashion, you can select the first option if it's offered to you, and then you can use this slider here to allocate how much storage you have for Windows and Linux. But as you can see, this isn't a particularly big hard disk for the amount of data taken up, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to go with a fresh install and click install now. And it's just basically going to confirm that it's going to erase everything on there, and I won't be able to get it back, and that's fine because I've backed the files up, and you did the same, right? So select your location. Then you put your name. Doesn't have to be your real name if you don't want it to be. Just whatever you like. No online account required, no nonsense, just fine. So we can see the model here, which is an EliteBook 840. So it's generated name. So I don't want that. I'm going to call it Steve. But whatever you want to call your computer, doesn't really matter as long as it's. I don't think you're allowed special characters or anything, but you know, letters and numbers are fine. So you can choose a username. So I'm just going to stick with that and then set a password. As you can see, it's a super strong one. You can log in automatically if you want, but for most cases it's not recommended. And you can encrypt your documents. Again, I'm not going to do any of that. I'll go through that here. I'm quite happy as is. And then it's going to go through the installation process and tell you a little bit about what it can do whilst it does that. I will also point out at this point, the reason I was able to get on the internet was because I've got a wired connection here. If you were connected with Wi-Fi, you would need to reconnect as it doesn't copy the Wi-Fi keys from Windows. But that's as simple as clicking on this icon here, although it may be different. It's usually like a couple of arrows or looks like a Wi-Fi symbol, and then you just select, type in the key, and off you go. In some cases, Linux might not support your Wi-Fi adapter out of the box, and in that case, the best thing to do, at least once Linux is installed, is to connect your computer to the internet using a cable, which should work. It's usually pretty good for cable connections. And then there is a program in here for drivers. Driver manager. You can open that, and the chances are if you run through that process, it'll be able to find the correct driver for your system. It's just an additional step that you might have to do. The installation can take some time, and there's a few steps to it. And there we are, that's the installation completed. So I'll now restart the computer. It'll prompt me to remove the installation medium, so in this case a USB stick, or it might be a CD. Once it's done, press enter. So now I've got Linux Mint starting up for the first time. Pop in our password. Enter. There we go. So we're now in. So there are a few things that are definitely worth doing when you first get into Linux Mint. So I'm going to cover them now. And they've very kindly put them as first steps. So you can change the color and night mode and dark mode if you want. Up to you. You can choose whether you want to have this sort of tab pin layout or whether you want to have it like the more traditional Windows style. You can do that from there. Again, I'm quite happy with the defaults. Next we've got system snapshots. These are worth setting up because they're quite handy for being able to reset your system if there's a problem. So say an update goes wrong or something like that. So I'm going to configure that now. So I'm going to click launch and pop your password in again. Linux pretty much always asks you to pop your password in before you do anything administrative because security. It's a good thing, but it can be a bit annoying. So we need the rsync version, so we'll click next, and then it's going to estimate system size and things like that. So yeah, that one. They recommend 5, and that's probably reasonable, but sometimes you might want to make this more or less. I sometimes set it to 3, but whatever works. So click next, and finish. And it just gives you a little bit of a safeguard for when you're changing system settings, or if an update goes wrong, you can roll back. So I'll do that. Now the next one is the driver manager. So when I mentioned before, if you've got a Wi-Fi card that isn't supported, then this can help you out. The only gotcha is the computer needs to be connected to the internet for it to work. So having a different USB dongle, Wi-Fi dongle that perhaps has a driver already built in to Linux, or just using the Ethernet if you can, is a very good way of just getting online. And then the chances are, particularly if it's like a Broadcom Wi-Fi adapter, I think most of those are proprietary drivers which aren't shipped with Linux by default, are available through here. In addition, you might find that you need this if you've got a NVIDIA graphics card. That's where the drivers for this to get it working properly come through. So we click launch, and it'll just quickly go and check and see if there's any other drivers that it can just quickly apply. Say quickly, it takes a few moments, but at least it does it for you. If you still find there's bits of hardware not working, unfortunately, you're probably going to have to go out looking for a driver yourself or using Google. So in this case, for this particular system, no additional drivers needed. They're all baked into the Linux kernel as it is. It's baked into the system ready. And then next on the list is updates. So yeah, we don't get away from those. They're still needed on Linux. So there's a few of them required when you install it for the first time. And then it also asks if you want to switch to a local mirror, and it's basically just asking you where do you want to pull the updates from. So obviously you don't want to be pulling it from a server in the USA if you're in Europe, or Asia or something. So if we just click yes, we'll go to a local one. So I'm in the UK, so I'll just update it's defaulted to the US, and I don't want that, so I'll just pick one with a UK flag. So I'll apply that, then OK, and then it's got a load more refreshing to do. Be nicer if it was a bit faster, but there we go. So that's refreshed, and then we can apply the Update Manager update because it's getting a bit old, this release of Linux now. There's a new one due out this summer, I believe. So that'll pull down the updates. So these are the ones that are available for my system. So you can uncheck any if you don't want them, or you have a look through and see what's what. Generally, it's advisable to install them for security reasons. So we'll click install, and we'll click OK, and pop our password in again to say that, yep, we want that to happen. And it will go off to the internet and pull them down. You can see individual progress like this by just clicking on the individual files list. Then it will start installing them, which again can take some time, and you can expand the details of what it's doing if you want by pressing the details button. Really, it's a good idea to go away, make a cup of tea and come back to this, because it really can take some time. So the updates have finished, and because that was a rather big update and changed a lot of system files, including Linux itself, it is asking for a reboot. The nice thing is it's not going to force you to reboot like Windows does, though it is advisable to do it sooner rather than later. And I want to do that straight away though. First, I want to show you something that you can do if you wish. So by default, updates are only going to install if you click on the shield here, double click on this shield here, and then tell them to install. It won't do it for you. But if you go to Preferences and Automation, you can tell it to automatically update certain parts of the system and updates if you wish. So package updates are the main system ones, which are here. You can toggle that on. And then there's Cinnamon Spice, which is basically updates for the desktop, so like themes and so on. Flatpaks, which are programs, or a way of getting programs onto your system. Probably a good idea to have those update. And then remove obsolete kernels and dependencies. Yeah, I would recommend that one's on even if the other ones aren't, because it just saves some hard disk space clearing out old versions of software that you just don't need, and otherwise would have to clear out manually using the command line, which is here and knowing the right command. It's just annoying. That does it for you automatically, and it's up to you whether you want to automatically install the updates or not, or whether you wish to do them yourself. I tend to just stick these ones on as default, and I'll leave that one as manual, just because sometimes when the updates are running, it won't tell you how far it's got through them, and it tries to prevent you from shutting down the system whilst you're doing it. It's just a giant pain in the bum in my experience, so I'd just stick with it that way. So I'm going to close that. Aren't any more updates, it's just refreshing. So system settings, we're not going to check there because we don't need to. Software manager allows you to install new software if you wanted to. It's a little bit like, you know, the App Store or Google Play or whatever, but for Linux Mint. One of the things you do need to do is launch the firewall and turn it on, because I don't understand why, but by default it is not on. So please turn it on. It's a very good thing to do, particularly if you've got a laptop and you're going on to you know, public Wi-Fi and stuff. And in fact, if you are on public Wi-Fi, what I'd recommend is switching off home, searching for the firewall. So if you connect to a Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or something, firewall configuration, log in again, and select public, which will just, you know, make things a little bit safer for you. By default I tend to leave it in public anyway, but for home, if you want to connect to file shares or whatever, it's often a good idea. You can also put custom rules in here, but I'm not going to go into that now, but just make sure that's turned on. And that's it for the general setup, getting going. I'm just going to reboot this now, just so it's got the latest updates running. By the way, most of the updates for Linux Mint don't require a reboot, but occasionally there's one that does. But as you'll see now, it's just going to do a normal reboot, and it's not going to go through a whole 30% complete installing updates. It's just going to do a regular shutdown and start up. No additional time installing. And there we are. Well, this isn't a particularly fast computer. Hopefully you can see that startup and shutdown is no slower whether there's updates to be installed or not, which is a nice touch. So almost forgot to show you how to pull your files off the external hard drive and back onto Windows. So let me just plug in my external hard drive. That means that little noise means that the system's found it and it's popped up on my screen. You can also see that just like on a Macintosh, it drops an icon onto the desktop for me. So the first thing I want to do is copy my desktop files to my desktop. So just click on the desktop folder there and then go back to my 500 gig drive and go to, I've done desktop. Click back. Clicking it, yeah, I want documents next. And I shall copy my documents and pop them in my documents folder. Very good. And then go back again. And then I want to do the same with pictures. Copy these, paste them there, and those were the three that I did for that. So first of all, I'm going to restore my bookmarks to Firefox because, well, that's the only browser I've got installed at the moment. So if I go to bookmarks and manage bookmarks and all bookmarks, I'm going to import and backup. I'm going to click on restore and choose file and go to 500 gig. One of the things you will notice is Linux doesn't have concepts such as a C drive or a D drive or an E drive. It's just got a name, if you like. I won't go too much into the file system, but don't expect to see drive letters. They're not a thing in this. So over to my documents there. So it's got my Firefox on there, and then yeah. And then we're done there, and I should find, if I go to my bookmarks, I have got my Linux Mint bookmark there, which I had saved previously. Now the other one that you might want is Chrome. Now you can get actual full fat Google Chrome for Linux if you want by just googling the installer, but by default we have a version called Chromium, which is more or less the same thing, but bit more open source. So we'll go to the software manager, which is pinned here. Takes a moment for it to refresh. Apparently they are making this a bit faster, but to begin with it's a little bit slow. So just typing Chromium. Yeah, there we go, Chromium web browser, and install. And it'll ask you password before installing anything. And again, that'll take a few moments. And you can still search for other software. I don't think they've got Microsoft Edge in here. I think you have to download that directly. But you can, I think you can actually install Edge bookmarks into Chrome quite easily, or I think even Firefox has got a way around that as well. No, we've got Hedge Wars. That might be. I think that's a bit like Worms. That one, I think. If anyone was a fan of Worms, you might enjoy that. Oh, com.microsoft.edge. Yeah, there you go. If you really want Edge on Linux, then yeah. In fact, for the hell of it, let's install it. Edge. Let's pull that through now. You can, of course, download Linux version of Edge from Microsoft's website as well if you want the official version. You can also see our downloads progress here. We're clicking on this. Yeah, it's just installing. So while that's doing that one, if we go to Internet, we should have Chromium. Yes, we've got Chromium. Pretty much identical to Google Chrome, and that's because this is what Google Chrome is based off. So if we go to our bookmarks and lists and bookmark manager, and then 3 dots and import bookmarks, go to our external drive and bookmarks again. And notice so these you can either pull in the Edge or Chrome. They are both compatible because Edge is also based off Chromium. So either of them will work. But we'll pull the Chrome into Chromium and click select. And then there we go. I should have my Linux Mint bookmark there. There we go. Very nice. And just wait for Edge to complete. There we go. Click launch to open it. Yep. Deary me. No, I don't want to sign in. Don't even ask. I think that's just a joke. Get rid of all that. Right, so go to 3 dots. Favorites. 3 dots again. Import favorites. So this is where you could choose to import it from like Firefox or something if you wanted. No, it's for importing it from file as well. So choose a file, 500, and then bookmarks, and then our Edge one here, and that's it. If we go to our favorites, don't think I saved any, but if there were any, they would be there. So I shall now close that and probably never use it ever again. So once we're done with the drive, again we can eject it by pressing the safely eject thing there, or we can press the one here. Both will do the same thing, eject it from there, and then you're safe to unplug it. The other thing that you might find is this little system report thing with a little exclamation mark in the system trace. If we click on this, it means that it's got something to tell us about the system that we might want to be aware of. And usually takes a moment. It's just telling us that there's an update to the version of Linux Mint. When I say an update, I mean a whole version update. So like moving from like an older version of Windows to a new version. It's kind of the same for Linux Mint, but it shows up in here. And if I wanted to, I could upgrade it doing that. Chances are you're not going to see that because you've got the more up-to-date ISO. I'm using a slightly older one here. But yeah, that's where it'd show up when the next version's available, which I believe is due out this summer, though there's been no announcement yet that I'm aware of. So yeah, that's that. So thank you very much for watching my video of installing Linux Mint on an actual computer, a laptop in this case, or the process would be very similar for a desktop. Thanks for watching, and I hope it was helpful.